Here we are. We're back in the picture.
It's good to be here. Thank you so much.
But joining me tonight, folks, is Kit Cabello, the host of Hardlands Media.
Well, this is a great pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me on. I want to give a shout out to KRTD Media, as well as Indie Left. They told me that, hey, you were trying to reach out to me, and I'm very glad that we got this situated as soon as possible. So shout out to the crew at KRTD Media, shout out to Indie Left, and shout out to all the lovely people that are right now here in the live stream chat. You all are wonderful, and I think I don't want to take up too much of your time. So take it away, Joe.
Okay, please share, everybody. I'm just going to say hi to a few people. Hey, Dolores, how are you? Shane? Great to see you here. Reef, hey, Reef, great to see you here too. And Kay, hi. Carmen Muniz, beaming in from Miami. Greetings, Earthlings. And Holly Horn is here. Hi, Holly. And Whatever Man says, hey, kid.
Welcome.
Okay.
I know all these lovely people. I know them all.
We're going to have a number of other people who I'm sure will be arriving very shortly, but we got a lot to talk about, so we are not going to wait. What we're going to do is start right up, and I'd appreciate it if everyone who's here could share for me, and if those who are here on YouTube could share, like, and subscribe, then that would be great too. Okay, so Kit, the way I wanted to start out is to ask you about your own work and what you see as your vision, okay, and your mission for what you do at Hardlands Media.
You know, that's a very good question in regards towards what our mission is for Hardlands Media, because it's changed over time. And a lot of, we started off with absolutely nothing. Daniel and I, we had a dream, or we had an idea of doing something different in the city of Chicago, and something that has been seen before. Now, again, I'm just rewinding back the clock to 2017. We're just coming off the disaster of the 2016 Democratic primary, where, again, we saw election fraud take place, and we felt that there needed to be stronger progressive voices, like build a large coalition of progressive voices. And, we were inspired by the work of the Young Turks and a few other people. Of course, again, I know right now a lot of people don't have a high opinion of the Young Turks, but mind you, this was 2017. It's not 2021 after what we saw.
Yeah.
And, we wanted to be the independent media network in Chicago. We wanted to be that voice. And we started off with nothing but a Galaxy S7 cell phone. And through that, we were covering protests. We were talking to activists. We were talking to community organizers. And through our hard work and dedication, we eventually, thanks to the help of our good friend Lainey Peterson, who hosts the show on Thursday, we got our foot in the door for radio. And through that, we managed to get on 2 radio stations. And Daniel and I, we did not major in college, anything with radio broadcasting. It was our first time doing it. We learned as we went, and through our dedication, we eventually had our own TV show on CAN TV, which is a local public access television channel in Chicago. And we got 3 seasons, which was fun, but it wasn't really, it wasn't doing anything more. It wasn't really shaking the ground. And we wanted to actually get onto YouTube. And here's why I have to thank people like Jimmy Dore and Graham Elwood and Lee Camp and Nico House and Fiorella Isabel and Craig Jardula, who were kind of pushing us and saying, hey, get more involved into YouTube, get more involved in having a stronger social media presence. And through that, through their, little advice here and there, we got onto YouTube. And our mission, and I actually want to read our mission. It's from our webpage. We have our website, and it says, our mission, Hard Lens Media. Hard Lens Media is a Chicago-based independent media organization established in 2017, covering national and local news, grassroots organizations, and political issues. We focus on groups, events, and individuals that do not typically have access to media coverage, with the goal of creating a more informed public. And our vision, because you asked what our vision is. Our vision, Hard Lens Media provides activists, organizers, candidates, and other groups with limited power with a platform to reach a greater audience, while also informing our audience about lesser-known people that are making a difference. And if you just go onto our YouTube channel, check it out after this live stream, by the way. You could if you click on videos and you could check out like the dates of our videos, you'll see a lot of our coverage. We're talking to third-party candidates, Green Party, Libertarians, Socialists, Democratic Socialists. We're talking to community organizers and activists. We did a small documentary in 2017. We've covered press events. And our whole idea is to amplify the voices of the voiceless, and actually also call out corporate media for its own hypocrisy. And, it's especially now after 2020 and 2021, what we're seeing right now is such a massive wave of censorship, but that's not derailing us, because thankfully we're also on Rockfin and on Odyssey. And through our actions, through what we're doing, we're able to keep on pushing forward. And our channel has grown exponentially because of the support that we have garnered over the years, all of our hard work, being on the streets, being on radio, being on television, building a platform on YouTube, and then later on Odyssey and Rockfin. And through our work, we've actually set up another channel called Chicago Corner that's dedicated to Chicago news and Chicago politics and Chicago events. We were learning as we go, and our mission and our vision will keep on growing and expanding so that eventually everyone's going to know who Hard Lens Media is and that we are the largest independent media network in the city of Chicago.
Okay. Okay, so that is the first thing. But recently you had a really great experience. You were the MC of the Medicare for All March in Chicago. So please tell us how that went.
Well, first thing I want to make very clear on your show, Daniel and I, we were invited to be the MCs at that event. Daniel and I, we were not the organizers. We were not in charge of the planning or decision-making or who the speakers were or who was going to do what. We were invited to be speakers, and we gladly accepted. So first, shout out to Joy Button. Shout out to Nimish. Shout out to all the other organizers. I apologize in advance if I forgot your name. It was a hot summer day that day, and there was a lot of planning, but it was the organizers, especially shout out to Joy and Nimish and everyone else too, who organized that event, that organized the march, that organized the rally, and it was an honor to be selected by them, Daniel and I, to be selected by them to be the MCs at that event. And I really had a lot of fun.
To interject here, Joy Button, if I'm not mistaken, is a Red Beret, okay, and had also connections to the national organizing group, okay, as well.
That's correct. I believe so. So all I know is that through her and the Mesh, they were organizing the event, and it was about 150, 200 people showed up for the march and then for the rally that took place at Federal Plaza. And they got the speakers all set up. It was a very hot summer day, and thankfully there was some shade from the buildings to give some relief to all the wonderful people that showed up. We had a lot of great speakers. Special shout out to my fellow co-host for Chicago Corner, Jerry Vasilados, who's right now in Nevada, Las Vegas. There's a film festival happening, and one of his films that he worked on has been nominated for an award. So I wish him all the best. Win it for Chicago, Jerry. And then there's also, of course, Jamal Green, who brought the fire. I know Joy Button. She also.
Oh, he did. That was quite a speech by Jamal Green.
Yeah, but all the speakers did a great job, and that's what I really want to say. Like, every single person did their job, and I know Daniel. I know he had a chance to speak at the end, but he had to maintain the live stream for the event on our YouTube channel. So it was our first time being an MC. So I'm just trying to rally the crowd, get everyone excited, get the energy going. And the thing is, we need to have Medicare for all. It's one thing to march, but why are we marching in the richest country in the world? The richest country in the world can't take care of its people, and the leading causes of homelessness is medical bankruptcy, medical debt. That's a foreign concept. I mean, if you ask someone in Canada or Germany or Great Britain or anywhere else, in Japan, they've never heard of that. What is this?
Yeah,
medical bankruptcy.
It just doesn't exist. In terms, of Medicare for all, of course, this doesn't have to do with the fact that we're the richest in the world. It really doesn't have anything to do with that. All kinds of countries with a fraction of our wealth and a fraction of our population have universal health care coverage of some sort. And some of them, if they don't have a Medicare for all system, they have a national health service. In Malta, they have 449,000 people in this little place, and they can afford a national health service.
Well, the issue is, again, the reason why we don't have Medicare for all is because of money in politics, because of corrupt lawmakers that have made a career for themselves to screw over working class citizens. They say a good game, and even those progressives who are in Congress now, well, where were they at? They were silenced for the forced to vote town hall. And mind you, forced to vote is an actual tactic that can be used, and they didn't do anything. Very similar like how they didn't do anything with the eviction moratorium, but I'm pretty sure we'll talk about that later. We'll save that for later. They didn't even acknowledge, and yes, Cory Bush did show up for one of the marches, but where was the rest of the squad and all those other 15 congressmen and women who were on the force to vote petition? They were nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be heard.
Absolutely.
They didn't say a damn thing, and yet they ran on Medicare for all. Where was Bernie? Where was the wonderful Elizabeth Warren? Where were they at? They were nowhere. You want to know why? Because they get their marching orders from the DNC, and because the DNC is a corporate prostitute like the RNC. The real fact is that Big Pharma and the health insurance industry have basically given their marching orders to the DNC and, of course, to the RNC not to support Medicare for all. And Nancy will do everything she can to make sure it can't happen. And, of course, Mama Bear being all needs her protection from AOC. AOC won't upset Mama Bear. I thought she was going to bring the ruckus. I thought all of them were supposed to bring the ruckus. And I wonder what kind of fear propaganda they're going to use during the midterms so that we can go out and vote for them.
So tell me something. Okay,
go ahead, sorry.
Tell me something. Oh, that's fine. I mean, January 3rd. Why wasn't the squad and the CPC ready on January 3rd? Or were they ready? It looked like they didn't have any plan, that they had decided just to cave to Pelosi. They had decided that it was just inevitable that Pelosi was going to be the speaker and they weren't going to oppose her. Okay, and by the way, I have a question for you about force the vote, okay, as well. The general idea of force the vote, okay, I certainly love. But what was the idea of going into January 3rd with the objective of forcing the vote just for a Medicare for all floor vote, setting up a bargain with Pelosi for a Medicare for all floor vote? Why weren't they ready just to go in and chop off the Queen's head? I mean, you don't go at the Queen if you're not going to chop off her head, because later on she's going to come back at you and she's going to kill you. On the other hand, if you lop off her head, then there are a number of other people who are going to emerge as possible candidates, and you can negotiate with them.
All right. Well, there's a couple of things I want to make very clear about the fifth, especially to the 15 congressmen and women who are the progressives who were on the force of vote petition. They didn't care. All right. Very, very simply, if they gave a damn, they would have fought hard. Remember, force the vote. It wasn't just something that Jimmy Dore came up with. This wasn't about Jimmy Dore. It never was about Jimmy Dore. I like Jimmy Dore, but it never was about it.
Socialists of America who came up with it.
Exactly, because that's what I want to say. This was from the playbook from the DSA, who's, again, their darling that they love the most, AOC. She should have known about it. She should have used that tactic. But the thing is, what happened was that the Democrats get their marching orders from their corporate donors. And of course, you have people who have large social media platforms like TYT and Sam Cedar who carry water for the Democrats because, oh no, Trump and Republicans are so bad. We know what the RNC is about. We know what they are. At least they're upfront with their BS. But the DNC puts on this mask thinking that, oh, if we put this mask on, people will vote for us because we pretend to care. They used fear and misinformation to derail the left movement. These cul-de-sac progressives who have gold-plated health care were basically telling everyone force the vote will lead to the rise of McCarthy to become House Speaker. That was never going to happen.
I know that was never going to happen.
That was never going to happen, but yet it was an effective tool to convince the other progressive lawmakers, and of course even the Democrats too, that, oh, no, we got to fall in line with Nancy because we want to show the Democrats unified because now Trump's gone. It was all a plan to not fight back. They don't have what it takes to fight back. They don't bring the ruckus.
I don't think they bring the head either, because at the time, I tweeted out a graphic showing but the arithmetic specifically that there was no way Kevin McCarthy could get in.
It would never have happened.
And there was no way Pelosi could overcome the opposition of even 6 members of the squad. Even 6 members of the squad would have been enough to derail her and block her round after round after round until she finally withdrew from her candidacy for the speakership.
So let's actually play a scenario. And again, we can what if all we want. We know what happened at the end of January 3rd. We know what happened when Nancy Pelosi was made Speaker of the House. Nothing fundamentally changed. But here's a scenario. There were 15 congressmen, men and women on the force of vote petition that ran on Medicare for all. 2 of them are from my state, Chuy Garcia and Marie Newman. Let's say all 15 of them got together. They are a strong voting bloc. They could have done something. And they could have negotiated something with Nancy to where she could have put the Medicare for All vote on the House floor. Now, two things could have happened. Nancy puts it on the floor. This is a positive scenario, by the way. All right, I'm doing the best I can with this. First try around. Oh, wait, somehow it works. All right, then it has to go through the Senate. It shines a light then on the Senate.
Yes.
Who will not support Medicare for All. But now also, let's say in another scenario, it goes for a vote on the House floor, and the House representatives choose not to vote for it. It would shine a light on the Democratic and Republican lawmakers that are heartless and are refusing to give their constituents Medicare for All at the height of the pandemic. Mind you, we're still dealing with COVID-19. And it could have been used as political ammunition by the progressive movement to vote out these Democratic and Republican lawmakers that are saying no. But because those 15 congressmen and women lack the backbone, lack the fire, lack the soul, they chose to help Mama Bear.
I agree. But
the thing is,
the alternative scenario is even better. If they got rid of Mama Bear, then those 15 would have been in a position to get floor votes on Medicare for All, to get a floor vote on various Green New Deal options, a floor vote on student debt, multiple floor votes, and in addition, rules changes that would have been important in getting floor votes in the future, such as a rules change that says, for example, well, if there are 20 House members that co-sponsor a bill, it gets a floor vote. Rules changes like that could have been actually negotiated. Furthermore, better committee positions could have been actually negotiated, not with Pelosi. She would have been gone, but with somebody like Jan Schakowsky, okay, or Debbie Dingell, okay, or Karen Bass. There were 6 or 7 other possible candidates who would have popped in as candidates for the speakership, any one of whom would have been to the left of Nancy Pelosi and much more friendly to the 15, and that would have made an honest bargain with them. Pelosi would not have made an honest bargain with them.
But here's the thing. None of them have what it takes to be a leader. None of them have ever stood up for the opportunity because they're also trained in the fact was knowing that, well, Nancy's been around for so long, so automatic, no one should challenge Nancy. We want to show everyone that the Democrats are unified. And real quick, too, I want to let everyone understand this, too. There was a small window where even Cenk Uygur and Sam Cedar agreed was forced to vote. But then somehow something happened. Did they get a phone call?
Yeah,
Did someone tell them what to do? It's very suspicious.
It was very suspicious. Okay, let me point up something else. But Carmen Munez just added in a comment one of my favorite notions, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. At this point, after the march, and after this whole fiasco that we've been through, why can't those 15 progressives run a vacate the chair motion on Nancy Pelosi so they can get rid of her now and get somebody more friendly to them in as Speaker in the House?
They don't have what it takes. Actions speak louder than words. They don't have the courage, and they're afraid, and they have no backbone. They are gutless and spineless. That's the real truth. If they really wanted to do something, they could have done something. Let me give a list of examples. They could have unified and could have really put the screws in Nancy Pelosi for a force to vote. They could have fought for a $15 minimum wage increase, but they didn't do that.
They could
have participated with the March for Medicare for All. They could have fought for other progressive issues. They could have reminded Joe Biden that through executive order, he can do this. Pardon student debt, legalize cannabis, increase the minimum wage. He can do those 3 things through executive order. They could have done that. And so now you're asking.
Hang on a second.
Go ahead.
how can he increase the minimum wage?
Or at least support the $15 minimum wage increase. He could call for that through executive order.
He can call for that, but what he can do is he can raise the minimum wage for federal workers. He already did that to 15 bucks an hour. In other words, under federal contracts.
Right.
People working under federal contracts, okay, have a minimum wage of 15 bucks an hour. But he didn't have to stop there. He could have put in a minimum wage for those contract workers of $20 or $25 an hour, which would have exerted a lot of pressure on other businesses in the private sector to raise their wage to $15 an hour, okay, and above. He didn't do that. Okay, but there's something you mentioned in a recent stream, which I've mentioned, okay, as well, and that is by executive order, he can use Section 1881A of the Social Security Act and give everybody Medicare right now. In other words, it wouldn't be the same as HR 1976, the Medicare for All Act, okay, right now, but at least everyone would have a regular Medicare. At least they would have coverage. He has the power to do that.
Right. Well, here's the thing. We're in agreement that they could, but they're choosing not to do it. And the reason why is either, one, they don't care. Two, they're just dumb and they don't know how to do their job. Three, everyone's just suffering with some kind of mental sickness, or it's all the above. Because let's look at the best example with what happened yesterday with the eviction moratorium.
Yes.
They screwed up.
They did.
The Progressive Caucus, let's say, for example, AOC and Cory Bush went online, did a live stream saying we had to run back to the chamber. You mean that you forgot? You didn't think the Democrats were going to screw up? Now, I mean, none of your team members were there to really raise a ruckus? So the thing is, maybe they don't know how to do their job. Maybe they assumed that, but remember, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. When you freaking assume that, our lawmakers care, and then you're surprised that they screw up. What did Nancy Pelosi do and the Democrats do? They couldn't get enough votes. The Biden administration screwed up too. They don't care. They're incompetent. So everything that we saw from January 3rd, let's start from the first month of January, all of it. Let's not even choose a date. Just starting with January, up until now, we've seen incompetence after incompetence after incompetence. So everything that you're saying, Joe, you're correct. They can do it. And people are asking, why didn't do this or why didn't do that? And we could what if this as much as we want. But the sad fact is that I think all of us need to come down to this realization is that they don't care and they're incompetent at their job. And if they're going to be doing stuff like this, then they got to go. Because if you and I and your audience can actually see what needs to be done and how to actually run the procedures in the United States Congress, then it's the audience here. It's you, Joe, and everyone else that needs to run for Congress right now because our current batch and our quote-unquote fighters aren't going to do a fucking thing for us. And 15 million Americans are going to be at risk of being evicted from their homes. And a pandemic, this Delta variant, I don't know. How dangerous is it?
Very
I hope.
It's much more transmissible. But not only is it but transmissible by itself. But what they found is that it is possible for people who have had vaccinations to contract it. When you have had a vaccination and you contract it, it may not be a serious illness for you. It probably won't be. It's going to be like a cold or something like that. But what they found was this. If you do contract it, the level of the virus in your nostrils and your mouth is 1,200 times the virus load of the original version of COVID. It's that much more transmissible. So people who have had a vaccination, if they contract it, and they may not know they've contracted, can come into contact with their children and their grandchildren thinking that it's safe because they've got the vaccination and not knowing that they have COVID, they could infect their grandchildren and their children.
And again, this eviction right now, this eviction crisis, 15 million people will be exposed to the elements. This will get
exposed to the elements, exposed to COVID.
Yeah. And then also, I want to actually acknowledge someone in the live stream chat, Carmen Menez. Ignorance of the eviction moratorium is on purpose to make people desperate to snatch up crappy jobs again and die for the dough. But I do want to give a little challenge to that, because the thing is, the money that's being paid to these workers, they're not earning enough to even still live in a home. People are working these dead-end jobs where they're treated like crap, where they're yelled at by their boss. And again, every single cent that they make is being taken through, again, debts, through again, this. It's impossible to own a home or an apartment in the United States, especially in certain major metropolitan cities like Los Angeles that made homelessness a crime, basically, setting up a camp, a crime. It's what's going to happen right now is we're going to see a lot of people get hurt. We're going to see a lot of innocent, good people being kicked out of their homes. And look, the number right now of apparent Americans to be kicked out of their homes, their apartment, 15 million, I think that number is going to be higher. And it's going to get really ugly real fast.
Right, because those people are going to be out on the streets. And when they're out on the streets, okay, and they have nowhere to go, they're still going to go into places like the grocery stores.
Yep.
They still may go in without any masks. There are all these red states where the rate of vaccination is very low in those red states. Things are going to be highly transmissible. COVID's going to get out of control again.
And we are a rich country. And mind you, we are supposed to be the richest country in the world, and we cannot provide single-payer health care. We can't do it. I just want to remind everyone, I live in Chicago, right? And we have a homelessness crisis here too. Underneath the bridges, by the parks, we're seeing tents being set up. These are Bidenvilles. And mind you, it wasn't too long ago that McCormick Place, have your audience, you yourself, Joe, Google up McCormick Place. It's a wonderful place. It's a great space for events. It's very beautiful. I liked it. It's pretty nice. You know, it's very nice. It's a very wonderful spot. But it wasn't too long ago in 2020 where it was being considered to be an emergency makeshift hospital to deal with the bodies, to deal with the people sick. Are we going to be walking back into that scenario because of the incompetence of the Democrats? Because, especially to the progressives like AOC and Cory Bush, yeah, they're sleeping outside the Capitol building, and that, okay, it looks all right. But they were also asleep at the switch. They let it happen. This is on the Democrats. I know people kind of come at me saying, well, what about the Republicans? I know about the Republican lawmakers. I know that they don't give a crap about me or anyone else. But the Democrats always say that they're better than the Republicans. They say that, oh, no, we have our hands on the pulse. We have our fingers on the pulse of the people. They don't. If they're supposed to be better, then they should be working hard. But no, our Democratic lawmakers are basically the Washington Generals.
Right. Okay, so let me clarify, a couple of things. First of all, Steve Day, the section I was talking about is a section of the Social Security Act, and it's 1881A. Okay, so just to get that particular fact straight. But now, when we say that the squad was asleep at the switch, what we're talking about, is the following. The only way that the House could be shut down is through Nancy Pelosi orchestrating it. She shut down the House. There was a vote on the floor to recess or to adjourn, or whatever it is that they did. So when Kit says that they were asleep at the switch, he is saying that as far as we know, they had no one in there for the vote. And this can be inferred from the telephone video that was done by AOC and Cory Bush. They had a telephone video up today where they were condemning the Democrats for shutting down the House, for leaving town. Okay, And they told this story during the video. They told the story of how they tried to stop it by running back to the House chamber. The implication was they didn't get in there in time to vote. If they had gotten in there, they could have blocked the recess, okay, or the adjournment, because it was the kind of vote that required by unanimous consent. She put it up, okay, for unanimous consent. So if one of them had been there, or they had been able to run fast enough, then the House wouldn't have been able to leave town. And they still might have been harangued into doing something about the moratorium, the eviction moratorium. But they weren't there to do that. So they let us down. They let people down by not being there. That speaks to the question of competence. How would they answer the question of their competence? That's what really gets to me. There's a big competence problem in relation to this.
Right.
Okay, so
yeah,
you had started to review the record from the beginning of January. So let's do a little bit of that review. Okay, let's do a little bit of that. They walked in on January 3rd. They were not ready for Pelosi then. They hadn't gotten together and decided on a strategy they would use in order to extract concessions out of her. Now, it turned out, we heard later, that they did get a couple of concessions, specifically for the period of the pandemic. They got a concession that pay-go rules would not be used to block a Medicare for All vote. Unfortunately, they didn't get a concession that they would have a Medicare for All vote, but they did get a concession that the pay-go rules would not be used but to block one. They got a similar concession with respect to Green New Deal legislation, that the pay-go rules in the House would not apply to that legislation. That's what they got. Those are pretty significant concessions, but since they had the balance of power in the House to find that out, all they had to do was to count the votes. Since they had the balance of power, they had Pelosi's fate in their hands, and they sold themselves cheap. That was their price. So there's a question of competence in that as well. But then, later on, they sit still while the Biden administration decides it's not going to hold a vote on the American Rescue Plan to put the pressure on the Republicans to vote for it. So what finally happens? After delaying for some amount of time with respect to that, they decide to turn it over to Bernie and get a reconciliation bill out. Okay? They don't get that reconciliation bill out until March 15th. It doesn't pass until March 15th. So almost 2 months are wasted in fooling around with that particular reconciliation bill. When they finally get to voting on the reconciliation bill after weeks of delay, then there's a situation where the House passes the reconciliation bill with the minimum wage provision in it.
Yep.
Right? And then what happens in the Senate? What happens in the Senate is, obviously, there's some back channel talking going on between Biden and Harris and Chuck Schumer. And there's also the parliamentarian. And the frickin' parliamentarian says, this is not good for a reconciliation bill, in spite of the fact that CBO had previously said this has an impact on the budget, which is the criterion for something being in the reconciliation bill. So the parliamentarian, who's not an expert, okay, at anything, at least the CBO people claim some expertise when it comes to judging budgetary impact. Now, I can argue with the amount of expertise they actually have, and many times I have, but there's no way the parliamentarian is supposed to have the expertise to judge whether it's going to have a budgetary impact or not. So she unilaterally decides that in her mind, it's not going to have a budgetary impact, so it can't be put inside of the reconciliation bill. So who is the parliamentarian? She's an advisor. She's a paid advisor. So Biden says, I respect the parliamentarian. So what if he does respect the parliamentarian? I mean, I respect the parliamentarian too. That doesn't mean I have to take her advice about anything. It's advice. That doesn't mean Kamala Harris has to take her advice. So what happens? So Chuck Schumer thinks, oh, well, I got to take the $15 an hour provision out of the bill. So he unilaterally takes it out of the bill without a vote in the Senate. He takes the provision out of the bill. Then he puts it on the floor. Then Bernie Sanders is forced into putting up an amendment to try to get it back in. $64 billion question. $64 billion question. Why did Schumer take it out? If Schumer leaves it in, then Sinema and Manchin and the other 6 Democratic senators have to tank the American Rescue Plan. The whole American Rescue Plan over the $15 an hour thing. And of course, if they did that, they would be asked, why did they do that? They would have to say, it's because we didn't like the $15 an hour minimum wage. So why didn't Schumer do that? Because he didn't want to put these people on the spot and force them into a position that was untenable for them. They all would have folded like cheap suits. They could not be seen to tank the whole American Rescue Plan. So Bernie keeps silent when Schumer does that to him. He should have immediately, when he got wind of that, said to Schumer, look, I'm not voting for the American Rescue Plan now. You just lost your 50th vote because you took out the minimum wage provision. So you lost your 50th vote right now. Actually, I'm sure he was told beforehand that Schumer was going to take it out. So that's when he should have said to Schumer, you've just lost my vote. You cannot take this out. You got to put it on the floor for a vote. You got to force these people to go on record. I don't care what you think of them. I don't care what Biden thinks. I don't care what Harris thinks. You ran, Biden ran on $15 an hour. We all ran on $15 an hour. I ran on $15 an hour. $15 an hour is staying in the ARP. You're not going to get it out except over my dead body. That's what Bernie should have done. But he didn't do that.
No, he didn't.
He sold out. He didn't do that.
Well, the thing is, this is the same Bernie Sanders. And look, here's the thing. I respect Bernie Sanders for awakening a lot of people just how corrupt this neoliberal nightmare truly is. I will always respect him for that. But he is not the fighter we all thought he was. In 2016, he let corporate media smear him. In 2016, he let his supporters and all of his pages constantly get smeared or being portrayed negatively or their sites being taken down. And he did the same thing again in 2020. And in 2020, it was worse. He wasn't even ready for any kind of tactics that the DNC was going to do. Bernie Sanders was never that fighter. He let it happen again. He wasn't ready. He didn't have a team of advisors that was ready for anything that the DNC was going to do. He kept calling Joe Biden his good friend. Bernie, that's your good friend, Joe Biden. The same Biden administration that screwed up the eviction moratorium. That's your friend, Bernie. That's your good friend, Bernie. You said it before, Bernie. There's your friend. And now 15 million Americans, and dare I say it, I hope I'm wrong about this, maybe more Americans will be kicked out of their homes and apartments. So that's on you, Bernie, and the Democratic Party and the Biden administration. Mind you, Biden, who's your good friend, and this also falls on the RNC too, mind you. But it's all one sick club, and you ain't in it.
Yep.
None of us are. They don't care. They got benefits. They got gold-plated health care. And they're going to go home to their families. They're on a 6-week break. Isn't that nice? They get all these wonderful things. And they're going to be having nice barbecues. They're going to be resting, taking their little naps. The thing is, we all know the procedures. And you laid everything out perfectly. Our audience right here that's also talking out here, they're laying everything out perfectly. You know how to run the Congress every second, minute, half hour better than our current elected representatives. They don't give a damn about us. And so what needs to be done, there's nothing to save the Democratic Party. If you're running as a progressive in the Democratic Party, my question is, I'm wondering, well, how long is it going to take till you just say, well, we got to vote blue no matter who? They don't care about us. They're not going to give us anything. So what's the alternative? The alternative now is a general strike. The alternative now is to support third parties. The alternative is to unfollow all of these politicians on social media. They don't deserve a following. What also needs to be done is every single American needs to protest in front of the homes and offices of these Democratic and Republican lawmakers. They don't deserve comfort. They don't deserve peace of mind. We have to be mean. If they're going to treat us like crap or pretend like, oh, I forgot how to run procedure in Congress, so we got to run to make sure there's a floor vote, then no. They're not going to get anything from us. Because if we have to suffer, if we have to deal with the pain, then they got to deal with it too. It's not right. The American worker is not lazy.
That's right.
The American worker is not entitled. Right. The American worker isn't just like just doesn't want to work. The American people, we're just exhausted by medical debt, student debt, evictions.
Right. So
what we're dealing with.
Back up a little and fill in two things. First of all, Bernie's cave in 2016 and his cave in 2020. Those two things were not without precedent. If you go back to the struggle over the Affordable Care Act in 2009, in 2010, Bernie sold his vote at that point. He was not originally for the Affordable Care Act. He was for Medicare for all back then, like he always has been. He was for HR 676. Okay? The administration, Obama, came to him for his vote, and he negotiated with them. And what did he get for his vote? He got a lousy $10 billion for community health care centers that was later negotiated down even. But that's what he got, $10 billion. He didn't go in there and ask for $100 billion. If he could have gotten $100 billion in way of community health care centers, that would have made a huge difference in the context of the ACA. A huge difference. He caved then. He caved at that time. Then he caved later in 2016. And he caved later in 2020. And as I've just said, he caved when it came to the minimum wage of $15 an hour in the American Rescue Plan. But he wasn't the only one who caved, because the American Rescue Plan, after it passed in the Senate, without the $15 an hour, went back to the House, and the House had to make a final vote to accept it. Now, why didn't the Congressional Progressive Caucus put its foot down at that point and say to Nancy Pelosi, look, this is not the bill we passed. It's lacking the $15 an hour minimum wage. We all ran on that. We're not voting for the American Rescue Plan without that in it. So this is what you have to do, Nancy. You have to pass the original bill again and throw it back to the Senate. If they don't like it, they can have a conference committee. And we can fight about it in conference committee. But we're not rubber stamping this bill. We are not rubber stamping this bill. We are not leaving the minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. We are not doing that. But our fighters in the House did not do that. They didn't put their heels in. They didn't fight for the minimum wage. They just let it go. Sure, there were assurances. Well, we'll get it through later. We'll get it through later. You can't play that game with the neoliberals. You can't play that game with the Biden administration. You got to get things when you have the power to get them. You got to use the power. As Kit said, you got to force the vote. That was another situation where they could have forced the vote, where they had the power to do it.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's their record on this. So now they're coming into the next reconciliation bill. Okay, and they have all said, they're not voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill without the reconciliation bill passing, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. And Sinema says to them, well, she can't vote for a $3.5 trillion bill. The immediate answer to her from the progressive forces, both Bernie, Jeff Merkley, the other progressive people in the Senate who claim to be progressive, and the answer from the House people should immediately be, if you're not going to vote for the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, your bipartisan infrastructure bill ain't going to pass. It's not getting through us. There just won't be an infrastructure bill. That's how strongly we feel about this. We let you go off and gave you leave to negotiate this bipartisan infrastructure bill on the condition that you would support the reconciliation bill. If you're not going to do that, we're not voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So screw you. That's the way it's got to be handled.
You know, the sad fact is that I'm tired of playing these games with the neoliberal Democrats and the Republicans. There's no need to play it. Here's how you make these people really crap their pants. You stop supporting them. You stop financing their campaigns. We got to look at different alternatives. There has to be a general strike, and we have to look at a Moving for People's Party, Green Party, Socialist alternative, something that is the alternative to the two-party system that we have, because what we have doesn't work. Our lawmakers could do all these things, but they chose not to, or they really screwed up. And that tells me they got to go. That tells me they got to get out of office. We got to elect them out of office, because if they don't know what to do, then they got to go. The debate is over. There's no need for them to remain in power. I don't care if they're someone's favorite politician. Right now, 15 million Americans are at risk of being kicked out of their homes, and that number will be higher.
Right. So let me set the stage for something else here. Okay. Joe Biden can do the three things by executive order that Kit and I have mentioned. He can also do a fourth thing by executive order, which right now is pretty critical. And that thing is to order the minting of a $100 trillion coin. The reason why that is so important, at this point, well, there are two reasons. The first reason is that it short circuits the debt ceiling crisis. which as of today, we are in the debt ceiling agreement. Freezing the debt ceiling ends today on July 31st. Tomorrow, a debt ceiling crisis starts. Tomorrow is the day the Treasury has to take extraordinary measures to stop itself from running out of cash, running out of the reserves it uses to pay for appropriations already mandated by Congress. Mm-hmm. From here on, they have to stretch things out, slow down appropriations spending because of the debt ceiling. What the $100 trillion coin does is it provides the money to pay down the debt as it falls due. It provides the money to pay for the rest of the appropriations Congress has already made. But it does much more than that. And that gets to the second reason why it's important. That second reason is that it takes away the arguments of the austerity mongers. They can't say we can't afford things when the Treasury is paying down the debt without issuing any more debt. By the way, within 6 months, it's going to pay back $6 to $7 trillion worth of debt because there's that much of short-term debt. So all of a sudden, our $28 trillion debt is going to go down to $21 or $22 trillion debt. And people are going to see that happening. So you can't have the Republicans standing up in front of everybody, having a conference about how we can't afford to spend for this, how we can't afford to spend for that, how we have to watch out for what we're spending because it's not fiscally sustainable. With $100 trillion in the Treasury spending account, you can't make that argument anymore. It's just gone. So those are 4 things Biden can do. If he did those 4 things, it would raise his popularity tremendously so he could begin to really squeeze Manchin and Sinema and the other people who are reluctant to follow along. But Biden, of course, won't do that. Just like he wouldn't do just forgetting about the bipartisan nonsense and rolling over them with the 51 votes he potentially had if he had exerted the pressure that he should have been able to exert. Agreed. So that gets us to the next problem, and it gets us also to the general strike problem. Last Saturday, or was it? Oh, I'm sorry. It was Wednesday. Okay, I had a discussion with Indy Left, really about these very same subjects. Okay, and Indy Left have really brought up an important point. Okay, and that point was, they won't listen to us. They don't hear us. They won't listen to us. If we're going to get these things done, if we're going to start to exert pressure at all, we have to get them to listen to us. So how are we going to get them to listen to us? That is where the general strike comes in.
Here's what we got to do. Again, a general strike needs to happen. And I understand for a lot of people, this is a very frightening thing to do because for those who do have work, you know, it's asking a lot from Americans. But our government hasn't given us anything or any reason for us to be obedient, to fall in line. They're not giving us a damn thing, so we got to do it a general strike. We have to do it. People have to organize, just like this March for Medicare for All. But there will be pushback. Similar for the March for Medicare for All, just like for Forced to Vote. There's going to be people on social media and corporate media. There's going to be people who are in positions of power, state level and federal, that will try and derail it. That will try and use fear tactics to try and scare people, to try and intimidate people. Right now, we're seeing our elected officials, they let the eviction moratorium pass or fail. Sorry, they let it fail. It failed. It failed. They let it fail.
They did.
So
They
what's
did.
the incentive for
They
us
let
to
it
just
expire.
go along and assume that they're going to fix it? If they're going to let this fail, what else are they going to let fail? Throughout January, like I said before when this live stream started, failure, incompetence, stupidity. And we can't afford it anymore. We couldn't afford it a year ago. We couldn't afford it 5 years ago. We couldn't afford it 10 years ago. And right now, a lot of good people, a lot of families are going to be hurt right now because of the incompetence of Democratic and Republican lawmakers. So everyone watching has every right to be upset and angry and yell at their politicians. And we need to start organizing for a true general strike and shut this thing down until our demands, until our bailout is given to us as we are owed, as we are all owed. No more.
Kit, how do you envision the general strike? How do you see it happening? Let's try to go through the steps.
The first step isn't any kind of political rally or even a meeting. What it will be is when you see families out in the streets, when it's everywhere, when you see people sick on the streets, when you see people starving on the streets, when you see people living in their cars and they're still going to work, when you see businesses being gobbled, small business owners losing everything, when you see homes and apartments being gobbled up by these corporations, that's the spark. That's what it's going to take, because that is what needs to be seen by every single American, unfortunately. It's going to be out there. It's going to be out there. And when it's out there, you can't turn your eye to it anymore. You can't just say, oh, that's so sad, when now there's going to be millions and millions of Americans out there. And the thing is, what every one of us who are, I guess, temporarily, mind you, we're all at risk of being out there in the streets. All of us. All of us.
We are. We are.
As soon as everyone realizes that, oh no, the thing that we're so used to, our system, it will let us go into poverty. As soon as enough people step up and realize that this is wrong, that's a thing. So the sad fact is, you have to see the desperation. You have to see it fall apart. And soon people can't ignore it. And since our lawmakers let it happen, it's up to organizations and activist groups right now to redouble their efforts on calling and organizing for a general, just like was March for Medicare for All, just like was Forced to Vote, that Jimmy Dore, Breonna Joy Gray, and Cornel West, and Justin Jackson, and so many others hosted. It's got to start off small so it can become a nationwide thing. And our politicians, we do not include these politicians. We embarrass them and we call them out and we force them to do their job.
Right.
That's what it's got to take.
Right. So, Indy Left had one very good idea that he spoke about. He talked about the need for a mutual aid infrastructure that we need to begin to build actually right now. $1 from everybody but per month, but to try to fund this. If we could get 200 million people contributing $1 a month, within 3 months, we would have 600 to help people who were falling by the wayside due to the general strike. In other words, some people are going to be impacted a lot more than others by the general strike. We want them to support the general strike. In return for their supporting of the general strike, there has to be money to keep them in the game, as it were. And so the idea of raising this $200 a month I think, okay, is a pretty a critical idea. It would be something that has never been done before in this country. It would be on an unprecedented scale in terms of trying to get 200 million people contributing to one thing. It goes way beyond what Bernie Sanders did. Okay. If we could organize something like that, do something like that, it makes the general strike far more practicable. Now, there are some people calling for a general strike on October 15th. Okay. October 15th is what? It's August, September. It's 2.5 months from now. Theoretically, okay, if we get going, we might be able to have 100 million by then, okay, or 150 million by then, or something like that. Some substantial sum of money to cushion the blow for some people who would be victimized by a general strike. Another interesting thing, okay, that Indie Left also proposed was the idea that instead of having a general strike all at once, that we organize things, okay, in terms of strikes against industries, okay, specific industries, and have basically rolling strikes where we're basically shutting down different industries over a period of time, okay, in a rolling wave, okay, of some sort. The reason for doing this is that in each industry we shut down, that goes to the pocketbooks of the plutocrats, goes to the pocketbooks of the rich. It makes them go to the Congress people they've bought off and say, but you got to do something about this because we are losing money. He thought that would be the way to get them to listen to us, okay, to pay attention to us. That kind of demonstrated power. I think this is a good idea and maybe something we can implement. It would be difficult. Certainly it wouldn't be easy, and we'd have to be raising the money. But it seems to me at least the glimmer of a concrete plan to get something like a general strike actually going and have it be effective, where we're in a position to make demands and to get the politicians to fulfill the demands. But what do you think?
I like that plan. I think it's effective enough to get people organized, but the infrastructure needs to be set up now. Activists and community organizers need to start talking now because our lawmakers right now are doing performance art in front of the Capitol building. And I don't have time for that. I don't have time for these politicians. So right now what needs to be done, what every single grassroots organization needs to do is maybe reach out to you, Joe, and Indie Left, and start doing this right now. Start organizing it now for October 15th so that there is a true general strike. But again, I don't think a lot of Americans really understand how bad this is with this eviction moratorium failing right now and how the Congress let it happen.
It's terrible.
And so the thing is, the only way, again, when it starts gaining more momentum is unfortunately more Americans witnessing this happening. It took time, especially when the economy collapsed during the Great Depression, where, again, our leaders during that time, they weren't helping us out until eventually we got to the rise of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his administration. We're going to need to have people right now organize. And again, sadly, a lot of Americans are going to have to see this crisis firsthand to where they can't ignore it anymore. And then it's going to shine a light on our politicians. So a lot of things are going to be happening. And the first step, again, like as you said, I like that plan. People need to organize so we can actually have a true political infrastructure so that this can be successful for a true general strike, but it has to be ongoing and continuous. and with a lot of Americans struggling right now, time is running out, and it needs to be done now. And I, for one, have to say that if the general strike is successful, if it does happen, we need to start promoting it and making sure that it stays active for as long as possible so these politicians can't ignore us. So the time is now. It's time for everyone to seize the day, fight for today, and live for tomorrow so that we can have a better future. That's what needs to be done.
I like that. Fight for today and live for tomorrow. And that's what it's about as well, because we have no more time. We cannot fool around with these politicians any longer. First of all, for lack of Medicare for all, people are dying. More people than have died before, because they're not just dying now due to lack of insurance. They're dying at greater rates due to lack of insurance because of COVID. So more people are dying now at a greater, faster rate than have ever died before. But secondly, we have people dying from the climate emergency. We see it all the time in all parts of the world, and these people will not move. They're always worried about their accumulated wealth. They're always worried about their continuous income. Their greed it knows no bounds. It knows no bounds. Once Teddy Kennedy asked, "How much do you want from these people? When will you be satisfied?"
Well, they're not. Our elected officials have been in power for so long. They're eating and eating and eating. They're fat and satisfied off of our hard work. Yes, we can't trust them, and we can't trust the ones that do say that they care about us, because again, they let all this stuff happen. This is on their watch. This is on them, not on us.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, just to underline that, okay, a little bit. When the squad failed on January 3rd, I was inclined, okay, at that time to say they failed. They made a mistake. They did a lousy analysis of the situation. It may have to do with some plan they have made within the CPC under the leadership, okay, of Jayapal, that they had a longer-term plan to get something done with respect to Medicare for all that was supposed to come to fruition during the spring and the summer. In fact, at that time, it even seemed to me possible that on July 24th, they were going to have something happen in conjunction with a march on the anniversary for Medicare for all. Well, the months went by, and nothing happened with them. It became increasingly apparent that they had no plan. And when July 24th came around, it turned out that it was the people who had to have the march. They weren't sponsoring it. They weren't supporting it. They weren't planning it. The 55-city march was done by us. It wasn't done by them. It was not me, us. That was the not me, us. They were nowhere to be seen, okay, except for Cori Bush, but they were nowhere to be heard from in relation to supporting what we were doing, even including Cori Bush.
Agreed. And we can't include them because they will co-opt it, and then they'll start dictating what can be done. The politicians right now have made it very clear that they are not our allies. And they can post some tweets of, oh, what does $15 minimum wage increase mean for you? Oh, what does Medicare for all mean for you? What does student debt mean for you? It means the world to a lot of people. Don't write about it. Do something about it. I want to see action, not statements, deeds, not words.
Right. And I feel the same way. And I also feel that we all recognize by now that $15 an hour is not enough. Demand for 15 started in what? 2011, 2012. It's 10 years later. Costs have gone up. $15 an hour is no longer viable. This has to be somewhere in the 20s. That has to be part of our demands. Medicare for all has to be part of our demands. The Green New Deal has to be part of our demands. Student debt elimination has to be part of our demands. Free college has to be part of our demands. Free pre-K. There's such a long list of demands that we have to have, and we can't accept no on any of them.
Agreed.
We just have to bring these people down. They've been running our lives for too long, and they've been screwing us for too long. All of us.
Not only that, not only do they need to go, not only do they need to be kicked out of office, they need to be publicly humiliated. They need to be humiliated and yelled at for how they let this happen. And it's on their watch on how they failed us. And everyone that's right now struggling, because on social media, it's happening right now. People are saying, I don't know how to take care of my family. I have family members at risk. There's friends that I know that are being evicted. Now's the time for us to come together because our politicians aren't coming to help us. Right now, our politicians are on vacation. They're on a vacation that they don't fucking deserve.
I couldn't believe that. Boy, Pelosi is so out of touch. So out of touch. How could she let the House adjourn at this point? How could she do that? Doesn't she see? It just speaks simply volumes. It speaks just as loud as her designer ice cream caper. It's the same thing. Who cares about her designer ice cream refrigerators? How did she expect us to react to that? How does she expect us to react to this? Of course, this is much worse. But what it is this is Marie Antoinette II. This is.
Well, hold on. Actually, in Marie Antoinette's defense, she never said let them eat cake. In her defense, she was an innocent woman. She just married a rich guy and just got punished for it. But she never said let them eat cake. That's gotta defend Marie Antoinette on that. She got caught up with the wrong crowd, but she never said let them eat cake.
Okay, that's fine. We accept the defense. Okay, Marie Antoinette. But what was Pelosi trying to do with that caper? Her designer ice cream caper. Was she trying to say to us, let you eat the designer ice cream? I mean, what was that about?
She was telling us to eat ice cream. So Nancy Pelosi, compared to the two, Nancy Pelosi far more worse than Marie Antoinette.
Far worse than Marie Antoinette. She let the eviction moratorium slip, and then she adjourned the House for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of eviction moratorium.
But
6 weeks past the eviction moratorium expiration, when landlords are free to keep people out because Nancy Pelosi wouldn't stay around and force the House to pass the legislation that was needed to get it sent to the Senate. Country have pushed through legislation on Friday or Saturday, kept them in session, gotten that legislation over to the Senate. Then she could have adjourned.
Well, the sad fact is that Nancy Pelosi is just probably too tired to do her job anymore, and she wants to go on vacation. So remember, AOC called her Mama Bear.
Vacate the chair. If she's too tired, run a vacate the chair motion on her.
Yeah, she's got to go.
Do it. It's a privileged motion. If the CPC runs it, it's a privileged motion. It has to get a vote. Why? Because the CPC is a party caucus. It is a Democratic Party caucus. It has a budget from the House. That makes it an official party caucus in the House. That means, according to House rules, if the CPC presents a motion, if Jayapal presents a motion on behalf of the CPC to vacate the chair, that motion has to get a vote, I believe, within 2 business days. That is one thing that can be done, of course, when the House comes back into session. It can't be done now because it ain't in session.
Well, sadly, we got to get rid of these elected officials. They got to go. They need to step aside, and we can't trust them. And to our progressive fighters, especially those 15 congressmen and women who are on the Force the Vote petition, where are they at? They let this happen too. They could have done something, but they chose not to. They could have stepped up, but right now they're doing performance art in front of the Capitol Hill by doing a sleep-in. But they were asleep at the switch. Bernie Sanders could fought harder. Warren could have fought harder, but none of them care. And they're just like the RNC. They don't care about us. And they're going to be putting out all these tweets saying, oh, we need your help to fight. They're going to start telling us, oh, we need you to turn out to vote for us in the 2022 midterm election cycle. Why should any one of us waste our time, our energy, our hard-earned money on them when they will fail us? We got to look at alternatives. General strike, vote third party, break away from this two-party system, and that's that. There's no need to have a further conversation.
And not simply break away from this two-party system, but break the two-party system.
Agreed.
That's what we need to do. So let us go back and consider all the comments that we've gotten.
Oh, we got a lot of comments. I think there's a troll in the chat, too. I think it's Elizabeth Warren or someone pretending to be Warren.
Yes, I do think there is someone who occasionally comes to these streams and who gives us a bunch of Warren quotes, not as quotes, but basically, claims to be Elizabeth Warren. But
Hi, Warren.
This time she did something different. She introduced the idea that Pramila Jayapal is spineless. That is a statement I couldn't agree more with. Okay, so going back now to the beginning, I guess I can't get back to the beginning in this interface. It starts at 9:27. Holly Horn says, precisely, Dr. Firestone. Steve Day asked his question about the section of the Social Security Act, which I already answered. Holly Horn says, Biden could issue an executive order to extend the eviction moratorium. Have you got a comment on that, Kit?
Can you repeat that again one more time? You were kind of breaking up a little bit. Can you say that again?
Biden could issue an executive order to extend the moratorium.
Yeah, he could, but he's not going to do it. Even then, because like right now, everyone's right now also yelling at the House Democrats. The Biden administration also played a role with the eviction moratorium failing too. Biden could do a lot of things through executive order. He's just not going to do it. It's just that simple. He won't do it. And if he does, I'll be surprised. People should be pressuring him to do so. He does have the power to help people, but he doesn't care.
Right. Okay. And to add to that, he had 1 month's time to say to the Congress that I'm sorry, I no longer have the authority to issue such an executive order because of a decision recently made by the Supreme Court. So Congress is going to have to do this. In other words, a month ago, he could have told Congress that they have to expand the moratorium, extend the moratorium. But instead, he waited until 3 days before the moratorium was due to expire, and then he drops the bomb on the House and says, hey, you have to extend the moratorium. So, It was Biden who created this original crisis situation by doing nothing during the month he had. Now, perhaps he intended to do nothing. Perhaps he was just asleep at the switch. We all know how often he seems to be asleep. So there it is. He could have been the one who was originally asleep at the switch. But as we said before, he wasn't the only one who was asleep at the switch. Holly Horn says that judge should be impeached. I think you're talking about the judge who said that no, maybe you weren't, because the Supreme Court judge who wrote the decision saying that the moratorium could not go beyond July 31st was actually Brett Kavanaugh, I think. And I guess I have to agree that judge should be impeached, okay, but for other reasons, not just for that. E. Heller says, how did nobody in the Progressive Caucus see that Congress would cut out early on their vacation? Because all the news was that the Senate, that Schumer intended to keep the Senate there until the bipartisan bill could be passed and the reconciliation bill could be passed. So Pelosi decided on her own that neither of those bills was going to be passed, and she decided to take the 6-week vacation now. I don't know what was going through her head on that, but she was doing this, from all we've heard, inconsistently with what Schumer planned, because he was planning on keeping the Senate in session until they passed these bills. Well, maybe, of course, Pelosi might intend for the House to come back in session as soon as the Senate actually does pass these bills. In fact, it could be that he adjourned, she adjourned the House as sort of a power move against the Senate in order to underline her unwillingness to pass the bipartisan bill, even if it passed the Senate, until the Senate passed the reconciliation bill. That may be why she made this move. She might have thought it was a smart move, but I don't see how smart it is. Of course, it's also a power move in relation to Biden as well, because essentially what Biden did is throw it to her and say, here, it's in your lap, Nancy. And by adjourning the House, what she's basically saying to Biden, no, Joe, it's back in your lap. Whatever the Supreme Court says, you have to declare the moratorium again, because we haven't had enough time to get this through the House. That kind of infighting may be going on. So the situation might not be quite as simple as we construed it. But I agree with Kit completely that these people do not care enough about us to extend themselves. If they did, they would have supported the Medicare for All March. That was a terrible insult to the grassroots. It was a terrible insult to the Not Me, Us movement. Does Bernie really think that movement that he started is over? The truth is, we don't think so. He may not be a part of the movement anymore, but that doesn't mean it's over.
Well, anything associated with Bernie Sanders, I'd back away from too. Remember, the Associated Press just released this wonderful article just 2 or 3 days ago where how our revolution is deciding to become more pragmatic progressives.
Yes.
That's what I think about being pragmatic.
Well, since I'm a philosopher, I really don't think that way when it comes to pragmatism. I remember people like Peirce, and Dewey, E.A. Singer. What passes for pragmatism these days isn't pragmatism. If it was, it would have a much longer view, and Medicare for All would have been passed years and years and years ago. It's the poverty-ridden pragmatism, okay, of Obama that is now the context in which that term is used, and that's a terrible travesty. But anyway, E. Heller says, how did nobody in the press in the caucus see Congress would cut out early on their vacation? I think I explained that. Steve Day says the squad slept during orientation. I've heard they slept during orientation too. Carmen says ignorance of eviction moratorium is on purpose to make people desperate to snatch up crappy jobs again and to die for the dough. Yes. Holly says, yes, Dr. Firestone, very concerning. Holly says, the willful ignorance. E. Heller says, meanwhile, Biden is lying about being able to catch Delta if you have had the vax. And now Stephen Day says that 1,200 times factor of COV-2. Yeah, that's really scary. Carmen says, right, Holly, willful, Machiavellian, ignorance. Steve Day says, the case for the job guarantee. Yes, there's a heavy case for the job guarantee, absolutely. There's no case against it. We should have it. And we should have it at a minimum wage, cost adjusted for every area across the country. The cheapest area in the country gets a living wage for the job guarantee. And it's got to be cost adjusted from there. In places like New York City and Chicago, the goddamn minimum wage might be $28 to $32 an hour. Heller says, hashtag Bidenvilles. Yes. Hashtag Bidenvilles is right.
Call them what they are, Bidenvilles. They're Bidenvilles.
Yes.
And it's happening under a Democratic administration, too.
It is. It is. Carmen Muniz says, hashtag Death Santis won't even stand for masks in school. Children are being affected by Delta right now. Aaron Taylor says, very difficult for states to fund Medicare for all, particularly countercyclically. I have to disagree with you, Aaron. The reason why is because Medicare for all is so much cheaper that it's going to be relatively easy for the states to fund Medicare for all. I know what the other MMT people are saying. I've been having big arguments with them online. I think they're off base on this because Medicare for all is not more expensive, it's cheaper. It's not more inflationary, it's actually deflationary. States can afford it. And the reason why I know that is because other nations with populations as small as 449,000 are managing to afford even more expensive programs like a national health service. They can afford it. If they can afford that in Malta with 449,000 people, there's not one state in the United States that can't afford a Medicare for all program. Carmen says, keep taking vitamin D3, friends. Absolutely, Carmen. Steve Days, how many links in the supply chain of goods and services can break? That's a good question, Steve Day. I'll bet there are an awful lot of them. Shane says, as I said in your stream yesterday, Kit, Bernie Sanders had the opportunity to lead, as did Warren, as did AOC, and they did, and all were leaders for a time. But where are they now?
They're nowhere to be found. They never were leaders in the first place. They let this happen. So screw them. Don't follow them. It's up to us now.
We should have known that Warren was not a leader when Bernie invited her to run for the presidency in 2015, and she turned him down because that was her chance. She was very, very popular then. If she had acted in accordance with the image she had built then, she would have beat Trump in 2016. Pocahontas and all, she would have beat Trump. KRTD Media says we need to do it ourselves now.
Yeah.
And Holly Horn says Carmen Muniz, 1,000 IUs daily. I don't think it's 1,000 IUs. I take 6,000 IUs of vitamin D3 myself. Aaron Taylor says Biden is lying about the Delta variant with respect to what? Holly Horn says, oh, please. Aaron says, but you can get lots of vitamin D from the sun. Yes, you can.
Just wear sunscreen. Just wear sunscreen, okay?
Yeah. Carmen says, Holly, I take mine with a little gulp of olive oil. Did you know it's fat soluble?
Okay, we're learning something new. All right, I did not know that.
Aaron says, oh, I wondered why they ran to the House floor. Yeah, that's why they ran to the House floor. E. Heller says, are extending unemployment benefits. E. Heller says, benefits. Yeah, they don't want to extend those unemployment benefits. They want to get people back to work so the rich people can keep on making their money.
Yeah.
Heather says, the truth is they don't want to do it. Holly Horn says, there was a demonstration at AOC's office on Monday. It was closed. Yeah, her office in New York, which, by the way, was supposed to have office hours at that time. By that was by Nick Brana run protest with Susan Sarandon doing the main speech up in New York. That was good. That was good. Savage Joy was there too. E. Heller says that's a garbage concession. Congress can ignore pay-go anytime they want to. Yes, but the thing was to get Pelosi to agree that she wanted to. So they got that. I'm not ready to say that's a garbage concession, but I'm happy to say that they settled for much too little because they had a knife to put at her throat and they didn't use it. Holly Horn says, I'm underwhelmed. Kay says, Sinema doesn't want to give up her vacation to even come back to vote on infrastructure. Well, that may be, but when she gets back to Arizona, she may find an awful lot of people protesting outside of her office. It isn't supposed to be a vacation. In other words, they go back and they take the pulse of their constituents, supposedly. And I have a feeling those constituents in Arizona are going to have a very lively and very angry pulse to show her when she gets back there. And Rick Lefebvre says, they're only significant if you don't give away your leverage. That's exactly correct, Rick. Rick says, I submit it is all staged by the Democrats' oligarchy. I don't know. Steve Day says, parliamentarians. KRTD says, Pelosi had no problem giving them pay-go because she would have been able to play games to stop them from bringing those bills up. And even if they were brought up, they don't have the votes to win. And in addition, by the way, there's also statutory pay-go. And Pelosi had no say about getting rid of statutory pay-go unless she was prepared to repeal that Obama bill, which is something she should have tried to do, but right at the beginning of the session, of course. And Shane says she knows this, and you're quite right, Shane. And Rick says these squad members are probably co-opted or stupidly naive. This is performative propaganda on the part of the administration's handlers. Yeah, but sleeping on the Capitol steps, it is performative propaganda, and it's too little too late because they're sleeping on the Capitol steps is not going to bring the House back into session. Yeah. Sorry, Kate.
So when we look at them doing this act in front of the Capitol building, what we're seeing from our elected officials is them pretending to care. We're seeing them try and fix their mistake. This is something that they did on purpose, that they were ignorant enough to let happen. And the sad fact is, I think because we've been going on for a little bit before we wrap up, but the sad fact is our politicians just don't care. And since they don't care, we don't need them. And now we need to do a general strike. What you're seeing on social media is nothing but performative art. And that's it.
Yes.
Right. I think I'm going to have to be heading out.
I do believe we do have to organize the general strike. I do believe we have to get that fund going, the mutual aid fund going. I do believe we have to organize all that. And I do believe we have to have that strike sometime this fall. And they have to see us organizing it. They have to see us actually raising the money. They have to be made aware money is being raised in the hundreds of millions of dollars for mutual aid to back people in the event of a general strike. I mean, that alone may move these people.
Yep.
E. Heller points out the CBO should be dropped into a volcano. Congressional budget is an oxymoron because Congress can always pay for federal spending.
I will have to be heading out pretty soon, though. I do apologize.
Okay, that's fine. I should have explained, actually, before this started, that how long you stay is always but strictly up to you, Kit.
Yeah, I do apologize. There are some certain programs that I have to start taking care of, as well as getting some guests, because a lot of people are telling me we need to start putting certain guests on Hardlands Media very soon, so that way we can have them on our show. So I'm looking forward on continuing doing collaboration with a lot of great content creators. Shout out to, again, KRTD Media. Shout out to Indie Left that told me to be on your show. Joe, I really am glad that you gave me a chance to speak out, talk about Hardlands Media, talk about March for Medicare for All, talk about how incompetent our Democratic lawmakers. Sadly, they don't care about us, and they got to go.
Okay, so before you go, Kit, how can people contribute to Hardlands Media?
Well, we have our website, hardlensmedia.com, HRDLNSMEDIA.com. We also have our Twitter page, Hardlands Media. We have our Patreon page as well. We know times are tough for a lot of people, but if you can't help us out, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our videos on YouTube, Rockfin, and Odyssey. We also have another channel called Chicago Corner. That's on YouTube as well, covering Chicago news and politics. And then we also have our other social media platform pages as well, but you can check out our website, hardlensmedia.com.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming, Kit. I really thought it was a wonderful conversation, really strong, also really what we needed. And we got to the final point, which is the most important point, which is the general strike.
Absolutely. Hashtag general strike, general strike, general strike.
Yes. And that's what we need in order to make them listen, to move them. That is what we're going to need. I'll be having more programs on the general strike soon. And I think maybe we're going to have to organize some panel discussions of that as well.
Let's make it happen.
In order to have that going. So, Kit, but thank you again. Okay, and I will see you next time.
No problem. Just let me know when, and I'll gladly be on your show. Take care, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Kit. Okay, so of course, the reason why I didn't end is because I always finish your comments. Okay, it's my custom. So I'm going to continue on that, but right now. So Steve Day says, but by the way, wasn't Kit great? I think he was. Steve Day says, hashtag Blue MAGA.
What's that?
Hashtag Blue MAGA is hashtag Blue Make America Great Again. I'm not sure what that actually signifies, but maybe Steve Day will tell us. Shane says, the parliamentarian is the leader of the Senate clearly. And Ghostart says, Biden's Director of National Economic Council, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Chief Economic Advisor for the Vice President, all held top positions at BlackRock. Yes, I know, Steve. That is Steev. Steve. Go-Start is Steve also. E. Heller says, Cori Bush has the nerve to promote her rally happening tonight at midnight, by which time the eviction moratorium will have expired. Carmen Rena says, can the Senate be made to drop vacation and come stop the eviction genocide? And Bonnie, I think you had a question before.
Yes, I did. Same question.
Oh, it was the same question Carmen asked?
Can they be called back?
Okay, it's the House. It's the House that went on vacation. It's not the Senate. As far as I know, Schumer did not get the Senate to go on vacation. He's still working to pass those bills. So the question is, can the House be made to drop the vacation and come stop the eviction genocide? I don't think so. I think that aspect is going to be up to Pelosi. I think it may be possible for the president to call a general session of Congress, but I have to double check that. It's not been something that's been done for a very long time. But to be honest, I do think that if the Senate does its work on the two bills, that then Pelosi will come back. She must have in mind that it is possible for Biden to extend the eviction moratorium. Okay. I also think it may be possible for the CDC to extend it. Now, that's not entirely as effective as an executive order. E. Heller says, can we just drop Joe Firestone into Biden's office as a relief senator and put Byrne on the bench? L. Steve Day says, Kelton in Bernie's ears for years. Yeah, Stephanie is in Bernie's ears for years, but I doubt that Stephanie had much to do with Bernie's decision in the fight for 15. I'm sure she wasn't in his ears for that. And Carmen says, I like your proposal better. E. Heller says, it was Weaver, and now that jerk weasel is running Nina's campaign. Well, if Jeff Weaver is running Nina's campaign, then that is on Nina. Carmen says, your correction. Shane says, Bernie didn't have to allow corporate media to smear him. He could have used the Trump strategy and called into Fox and Friends and called into MSNBC shows. KRTD Media says even Kyle Kulinski knew Bernie shouldn't have given Biden his endorsement without concessions. Yeah, even I knew that too. KRTD Media says Bernie could have endorsed the Green Party candidate for president, but he was afraid. Yes, he was. In fact, he could have become the Green Party candidate for president himself. I think Howie would have given way to Bernie gladly. That is, if Howie could have run for vice president, he probably would have happily run alongside Bernie as the vice presidential candidate. Steve Day says, run to the floor at the ring of the bell. KRTD Media says, that's Shane, says, here's the question. If Shahid ran as a Green or People's Party, do you think he'd get the same amount of votes? Yes, I actually do. Unfortunately, the amount of votes he got last time, okay, is not enough to win. The real question is, if he ran as a Green or People's Party candidate, could he get a majority of votes in that district? Could he get a majority of votes if it came down to the runoff? And could he get a majority of votes if he was running against Nancy Pelosi? In the California jungle primaries, okay, it's not clear if he would have gotten any more votes had he run as a Green or People's Party candidate, as he got from running as a Democratic Party candidate. So that was a jungle primary. He came in second, so he got an even Steven runoff, okay, with Pelosi anyway. And in the runoff, she won. E. Heller says $3.5 trillion for infrastructure. It's pathetically low. Should be 3 times larger. Absolutely, E. Heller. It should be 3 times larger. Howie Hawkins' plan for meeting the climate emergency, including infrastructure, was $42 trillion over 10 years. That averages out to $4.2 trillion per year. In previous live streams, we've gone over Howie Hawkins' plan in quite an active conversation with Howie. KRTD Media says, when Kyle and Junk left Justice Democrats all those years ago, they left someone in charge who got a CNN contract, Alexandra Rojas. She has a CNN contract. Yes, right now. A CNN contract, which means, of course, she sold out to CNN. Kay says the bipartisan bill is a privatization bill. It doesn't have as much privatization as it had at the start. They took a good bit out of the privatization part of the bill. There was an article the other day by Dave Dayen about this, okay, in the American Prospect. But Dave is very good at, let me see if I've got that scheduled for next time. I don't know if I've got that scheduled for next time. Tuesday. No, I don't, but it's somewhere in my basket of links, as it were. Anyway, Carmen says, did the General Strike Fund get set up yet? Anyone know? No, I'm not aware of it getting set up yet. KRTD Media, the Justice Democrats are a failed experiment. E. Heller said the debt ceiling is also a fake crisis. Of course it's a fake crisis. E. Heller says no, they don't. I'm not sure what that was in response to. E. Heller says if Congress hits the debt ceiling, they automatically raise the debt ceiling. Unfortunately, they don't automatically raise the debt ceiling. They have to debate it. Also, the Republicans always use it as a bargaining leverage to get cuts in certain programs for Democratic constituencies. There's a big to-do about it. It absorbs a lot of time. And then they finally make a settlement as they're approaching October 1st. It's not an automatic raise of the ceiling. If it was an automatic raise of the ceiling, there wouldn't be any debt ceiling crisis. Now, it is a false crisis. The reason why it's a false crisis is because the authority exists for the president to mint a $100 trillion coin anytime he wants to. And then there's no need to issue any more debt. No need at all. So yes, it is completely a false crisis. But it is a political crisis. It's a false economic crisis, but it is a true political crisis. And it's going to be costly. If the Republicans stretch things out as they normally do, it's going to cost many billions of dollars for the federal government, probably $10 billion. If it extends for long enough, it could cost $15 billion. E. Heller says the national debt is not anything we need to worry about. It's true. It's not anything we have to worry about. Neither the level of the debt nor the debt to GDP ratio is anything we need to worry about. It. In that sense, it is a false issue. But it is a political issue, and we have to address the political issue. Why? Because we're not going to get to educate the whole country over the next 3 months over the fact that it's a false issue. The only way to get them to see that is to mint the $100 trillion coin so they can see it's a false issue. So they can see the authority to exist that existed all along. He says, or you can just tell the austerity mongers that they are full of sizzle. Yes, you can. But that's not going to do any good either when the federal government has to restrict its spending because its Treasury spending account balance is getting too low. More smart, a macroeconomic action in that coin, yes. So amazing a card to play. Thank you, Steve Day. It is. He says, stop letting them use their austerity framing. You don't need $1 trillion coin. E. Heller, you cannot change the framing in 3 months and win a political messaging contest. It cannot happen. It is not going to happen. We have been trying. I have personally been trying to get people to drop the austerity framing since I got into MMT in the early part of 2010. It's been 11 years since then, more than 11 years. It's 11 and a half years. And we still haven't stopped them from using their austerity framing. I have written 7 books that in one way or another try to get people to drop the austerity framing. Stephanie Kelton recently published her bestseller on the deficit myth to try to stop people from using their austerity framing. What happened a few days ago when all of the Republicans got out in front of the whole country, all the Senate Republicans got out in front of the whole country and did nothing but propagandize the austerity framing, in spite of Stephanie's book. E. Heller says, 25 billion more to defense overnight with nobody asking how you're going to pay for it. Sure, you can tell people that all night long. But that's still not going to persuade them that the $28 trillion national debt is not a problem. They still see that $28 trillion national debt. But you know what is going to stop them, E. Heller? When you mint the $100 trillion coin and you pay off 6 to 7 trillion of that 28 trillion sum in 6 months, that's going to persuade them. When you prove it by knocking that down by $7 trillion in 6 months, that's going to prove it to them. E. Heller says, hit them in the wallet. Kay says, there is scuttlebutt about a general strike. Don't worry, Kit. Cory Bush is having a midnight rally. That'll fix it. Carmen Muniz says, the federal government, namely Biden, G'd us out of 600. Yeah, that said everything right there. I know. There was no reason why he had to do that. No reason at all. He had advisors who were telling him he could easily do the 2,000. That didn't matter. Reeve says, Nick Brana been sneaking in on that Cory Bush. Sleep in, laugh out loud. Oh, is Nick out there? Is he going to sleep in with Cory Bush? E. Heller says, it's possible Nick is trying to get her to switch parties. That would be a wonderful thing if she switched parties. Kay says, I can't even afford a vehicle to live in. Shake my head. And Dolores says, it's being done on Biden's and the Democrats' watch. Carmen says, quote, we're not outnumbered, we're out-organized. Malcolm X. E. Heller says, by mutualaidhub.org. Thank you, E. Heller. Kay says, my greatest fear and worry is actually being homeless. I'm sure it is, Kay. E. Heller says, when pandemic unemployment insurance runs out in September, it will be worse. Yes, it is going to get worse. Holly Horn says that Malcolm knew. I guess that's Malcolm X, right? And Ghost Art says unemployment is also ending. Holly Horn says, yes, indeed. Floods, hurricanes. Evelina says, I'm late, but glad to be here. Glad to see you, Evelina. Carmen says, the voting rights fighters are already going to jail. This is a horrible time to go to jail because of COVID. They are courageous. General strikers will need the bond money to get out right away. Yes, they will. Kay says, hi, Evelina, glad to see you. Holly says, nothing from them. Kay says, AOC was in Cleveland helping Nina on that day. We need Nina. We do need Nina. E. Heller says, it wasn't enough back then either. E. Heller says, hashtag fight for 40. Holly Horn says, but UBI. No, BI, not a UBI. A BI for anybody under a certain annual income to be enforced by the IRS. The KS blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to read out KS he's a troll. And Elizabeth Warren is saying a bunch of canned stuff from Elizabeth Warren, which I won't read. Kay Clark Ryan says people don't want to help each other anymore. Scrolling through Elizabeth Warren. Hi, Kay really wanted to hear Kit speak. That was before he was speaking from 9 until now. Kit is a very good and inspiring speaker. And Holly Horn says, but we represent them. We feed them. That's what Nancy says. That's what Nancy says. So Elizabeth Warren says, oh, good, the chat trolls are here. Elizabeth Warren says, I'm not running for president. Elizabeth Warren says, how do you think we build a future? I think we build it by investing in our kids, investing in education. And Shane says, Pelosi is on vacation with her $30 ice cream and her $15,000 fridges. Ghost Art says, TV wasn't invented until the 1920s. And Elizabeth Warren says, consumer banking, selling debt to middle-class families has been a gold mine. Most of the Elizabeth Warren statements are quotes from Elizabeth Warren, so, okay, I'm not going to read them. E. Heller says Jayapal has proven that she is spineless. I think so, too. And L. Stephen Day says, hashtag mint the coin. I scrolled down too fast, guys. I'll be back. And Kay says, who is Weaver? Jeff Weaver. He was Bernie's campaign manager in 2016. Ghost Art said it should be easy to organize a general strike since millions will already be there. You mean in the streets? Yes, millions will already be there. But they won't be around Los Angeles because they have now made it illegal in the city of Los Angeles to be homeless. E. Heller says DNC would have smeared Shahed either way. That's true, E. Heller. And Ghost Art says, and by be there, I mean on the street. That's right. Carmen says, Joe with his basket of progressive goodies. Steve Day says, hashtag mint the coin. Steve Day says, Weaver advised both Bernie's POTUS campaigns. Yes, but he wasn't the campaign manager. in 2020. Carmen says, and Bonnie with her bouquet of beauty. And Bonnie giggles at that one. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen.
Carmen says, Kid is angry enough, and that's what we need. More Hulk must smash, less foofy poo Antoinette ice cream Pelosi's. Wow, that was a mouthful, Carmen.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful. Okay, looks like I've gotten through your comments. I think some notable people were absent here tonight. Some of our regulars, but in general, we got a very good showing because I think a number of people came here to hear Kit. Okay, I think that Kit is a very inspiring speaker. I did skip over some comments, so I got to go back and get those. I don't know how I missed them. I think I missed them. Oh, there's Lana. Okay, so I'll go back to Shane at 10:30. They all failed. We need to do it ourselves now. Lana says, anyway, I enjoy looking up people's names. Since I am late to this party, checked on Cabello, supposedly Latin Spanish for the luxurious hair. Laugh out loud. Now back to the business at hand. Okay, says people are once again protesting in front of Pegosi's house. Great, great. And Steve Day says Pegosi thing is a very poor allocation of power to her San Francisco district. And Lana says, since Reagan, our country is about short-term profits versus long-term goals. Yes. Not really pragmatic. Not true pragmatism. KRTD Media says Nina Turner and AOC didn't even mention the march on their rally. I know. Evelina says, yes, you're right about that. But Dr. Howe, but pragmatism today, not what it used to be today, more a matter of political expediency, if even that, or just elitist convenience. Dr. Howe, not Dr. Howe, laugh out loud. And whatever man says, what my question is, can't the states fund their own Medicare for all? I'm working on an M4A amendment, but I need information on the funding source. At the state level, there may be some help from the federal government through waivers under the Affordable Care Act. That help could be substantial, but there would also be a substantial amount that would have to be raised in taxes from the state. Now, people sort of blanch at that and say, oh, the states would have to raise taxes. The point being, the people who live in the state will save far more money under Medicare for all than they are paying now for their coverage. And the additional taxation they would have would not be nearly as great as what they save for their additional coverage. I'm sorry, for their current coverage, I meant to say. Lana says, agree, Bidenvilles. We can't blame Trump on this point. No, we can't. And Evelina says, Dr. Joe, not Dr. Howe. Well, thank you. And whatever man says, hey, Lana, Case says, we need single payer. And Lana says, whatever. Joe and others can help with that. Robert Hockett might be a good source, or Fadl Kaboub. Yeah. But actually, I think I'm a pretty good source on that as well, because I've been looking in some detail into the situation, in Washington State, and I believe that they would have a sustainable program similar to Medicare for All, that with the federal help under the Affordable Care Act, they could certainly sustain. Steve Day says, at last I get it. Deflation enables USA states Medicare for all. Could do that, yes. Now, it depends on the particular circumstances in every state, how it could be done. There has to be a program that would be a little different, designed for every state, depending upon the conditions of that state. But certainly, I personally don't have any doubts that a regional Medicare for all plan, states going jointly to the federal government out west, Washington, Oregon, California, um, um, Arizona, also Nevada, New Mexico, and Colorado, that they could all adopt a similar plan. Their states are rich enough to do it and get considerable concessions from the federal government, considerable help from the federal government, and that whole region would have a sustainable Medicare for all plan. Lana says, wishy-washy Warren, no thanks. If she'd become the president of the United States in 2016, Lana, she might not have been wishy-washy then. If she was swept into office with a big margin over Trump, she might have started throwing her weight around, but maybe not. I agree that she has been wishy-washy. And Ghostart says, in case EW pushed this out, Biden's director of National Economic Council, Deputy Secretary, Chief Economic Advisor, all her positions, BlackRock. I read that before. E. Heller said, don't let a small group of MMT absolutes turn you off from the truth of how federal spending works. Keep pushing back on austerity and do whatever you can to move healthcare forward. I completely agree, E. Heller. And Lana says, I take between 5K and 10K vitamin D per day. Dark-skinned people don't absorb from the sun as well as desk jockeys like me, who are mostly inside. Yearly block test is cheap and a must. Lana says, whatever, you are welcome, and whatever man says. Did you hear that, Kit? I think Kit was gone by then. Get Joe Robert Hockett, Fadl Kaboob on HLM for a discussion about funding Medicare for all at the state level. Oh, by the way, Fadl was on the Generation Change show. The show run by Jen Perelman and her sidekick, I think his name is Jason something. Okay, they had a panel discussion. Okay, Fadl was on the panel, and he was asked about the possibility of a state-level Medicare for all. And he gave a completely different answer to that question. Well, I shouldn't say completely different, but a somewhat different answer, much more qualified in his response. Okay, the response that he gave on macro and cheese seemed to be easily interpreted as just a rejection of state-level Medicare for all. But on Jen's show, he was much more qualified, okay, about that, and seemed to be open to Medicare for all at the state level under certain conditions, or Medicare for all like programs at the state level. So you have to take a look at that stream. It occurred, I guess, about a week ago on generational change. You should be able to find it. I actually tweeted about it after it occurred. Lana says, blood test, not block test. I hate this keyboard. Karstadt says, pragmatic progressives laugh out loud, oxymorons. KRTD Media says, the last senator I'd consider a fighter is Mike Gravel. Yeah, maybe so, Shane. Maybe so. Maybe the last one was Mike Gravel, come to think of it. Evelina says, excellent, KRTD Media. Shane says, Warren's wealth tax was extremely performative. More than anything else, Schumer told her to get a Republican to support it, and she backed down. She could have blocked everything till he gave her a vote. Shane, you're absolutely right. And Dolores Pierce says, thank you, Kit, for a great discussion. I thought it was a great discussion. Great conversation. Carmen says, like the Democrats' performance theater with kitten claws, laugh out loud. And that other time when they ordered catering in Congress. But I forgot what first act was about, but it was just more pandering. Yeah, that was those were the Kenty cloths. Yeah, kitten cloths. Kay says, yes, thank you, Kit. Carmen says, Kenty cloths, correction. Steve Day says, general strike. Evelina says, Kit was great. Carmen says, Joe validates our parking, laugh out loud. I meant comments. Steve Day says, hashtag Blue MAGA, Grumbine, laugh out loud. Oh, I see. Okay. Kay says, yes, Kit was a great surprise. He was a surprise? Why a surprise? Why was he a surprise? Anyway, his Hard Lens media stuff is always dynamic. It's always forceful.
Maybe they saw the middle finger that he did in the last one.
Yeah, in the last couple of ones, he could not restrain his middle finger. Bonnie and I were laughing at that. I mean, he just gave the middle finger to Nancy Pelosi so often. It was hilarious. Kay says, I used to follow them, but it was too much local Chicago coverage. I think they still have a lot of local Chicago coverage, but also Kid does live streams on his own when he gets angry about a national issue. Okay, I gave you a link to 2 of the live streams in the description. So, but click on those and you can check out those. They're fun. They're very good. Carmen Muniz says, thanks for the House Senate correction, Joe. And Chaos Inc. says, yeah. Chaos is going. Yeah, Chaos is a robot. The bot. Oh my God, Weaver at Nina. Oh no, that's what I say. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Anyway, you get the picture. Jeff Weaver is a no-no. He is a no-no. Kay says, this has been a very good show tonight, Joe. Thank you for that. Thank you for coming, Kay. And thank you for the compliment. And Russ says, I came in very late. Kit was just signing off. Then you missed all the fireworks. And Lana says, you missed mine. Kay says, I love you all. We love you, Kay. Carmen says, it was a wonderful show. I will sleep well thinking it all over. Good night, beautiful people. Thank you, Carmen. And Lana says, hi, Holly and all. Lana says, Hackett was attempting to educate how the states can create dollars. Also, Kaboob, you were also definitely a good source. I wanted all the options to be heard. Thank you, Lana. That's fine. Carmen says, whatever happened to David Strider? Is he still around? He just jumped into my head. I don't know. I haven't seen him for a long time. I don't know what he's doing. He ran for Senate twice. Elaine McFord said, New Green Deal for all. No, that's Nancy's term. Green New Deal for all. Oh, by the way, Kit restrained himself tonight. He usually talks about Nancy. He has a very good way of saying it. It's very funny. I was hoping he would go into that a bit. He would talk about Nancy. Anyway, looks like we're through all the comments. I'll be back on Tuesday. Okay, I'll be back with a new show on Tuesday. What I'm doing now is I'm going to do news shows on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then I'm going to have conversations generally on Thursday and Saturday. Last Wednesday, I had a conversation, with Indy left because he wasn't available on Thursday. But my regular plan is to do news shows, basically single news shows, solo news shows on Tuesday and Wednesday, and the conversational shows on Thursday and Saturday. So that's just to fill you in on some changes in my thinking. So Dolores says, thank you for a great show tonight. And Lana says, good night. Just FYI, I am taking a Twitter break. Okay, I know. So does that mean if you're taking a Twitter break that I should no longer be tweeting at you about when my show is going to go on, Lana? Okay, because you have said that you want me to, but to give you notice with the tweet, which I have been religiously doing. So if you're taking a Twitter break, does that mean that I should not be doing that during your Twitter break? Please let me know. Dolores Pierce says, good night, sweet dreams. Same to you, Dolores. Sweet dreams to you, too. Lana says, you can because others will see it. That's true. Others will see it. Okay, thank you. I will certainly do that. And Carmen says, see you Tuesday then. Love and hugs. Thank you, Carmen. And love and hugs to you too. And love and hugs to everybody. By the way, I'll see you Tuesday.